Welcome, everybody. This is the Jaden Jeffs podcast where we ask questions about religion, cults, and cash. Today, we're here to talk about none other than Warren Jeffs. I go on YouTube all the time and I see these videos about him, and you can watch them all day and get disgusted and whatnot, but I decided that it was time for me to make a video because people, a lot of times when I get into personal conversations, they want to go really deep and ask me all these different questions, and so now it's getting to where it's just a little too often, and so now I'm just going to tell them, you know what, I don't want to talk about this. Go watch my podcast video about Warren Jeffs, and that'll tell you everything I think and everything you need to know about it. As you can see, I'm drinking wine here today, and any time that I talk about my dad, I should be drinking wine because I can't coherently talk about it unless I'm drinking wine. So if you'll provide me a nice glass of wine with a high-quality cup, then I'll come and talk about Warren Jeffs with you. I'm sure there's a lot of questions people even have after this podcast episode, so they can just put them in the comments. At some point, I'll get out the wine again. We'll do another episode. As you can see, I have my glasses on today. My eyes become a flame of fire at times, and my hair already is a flame of fire. And I'm trying to keep that from getting too out of hand. I don't want your guys' eyes hurting from looking into mine. It's just necessary to have these sunglasses on so that things stay under control, and it's necessary for me to drink wine so that I can coherently put out my sentences to you guys in an appropriate manner. Some people probably think that I should be 10 beers deep, all drunk, sitting here talking about dad, see what I really think. Well, I probably would do that maybe sometime, but right now I need to coherently give you guys a understanding of Warren Jeffs. So just sit with me while we start from his early life, and I'll talk about a lot of general things that happened, and then as we get to the point where I came around, because this guy provided the semen for my biological makeup, and that's why sometimes I call him dad. Some people wonder why I don't just say father or Warren Jeffs, and in this episode I probably will say Warren Jeffs more often. I'm just a little bit into the habit of saying father back in the day, but in the FLDS it was disrespectful to say dad, and so I called him father my whole life, and I don't like to call him father anymore. It's weird to me. That was always a respectful word growing up, and I don't like to say father, so to me, dad works. If you don't like dad, then I just don't even know what to say. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. I also, generally on my podcast, am going to avoid swearing, but if I swear today, which even today I'll try to avoid some, but I don't care if I swear today. I'm drinking wine. I don't think I can help it a whole lot. And you guys should absolutely give me all the wine breaks I need, because don't sit there and complain if I pause for a minute to drink some wine, because if I stop drinking, if I stop feeling right within while I'm talking about this, then I'll begin to, start mumbling my words, and my mind will start wondering this and that, and I'll just not be able to coherently speak to you guys the way I appropriately should during this podcast. So let's talk for a minute about Warren Jeffs' childhood, where he was born. Warren Jeffs was born in Sacramento on December 3rd, 1955. If you are a young baby that's prematurely born in Sacramento, California, I automatically would have serious concerns. Right from the beginning, I would immediately do something different. I don't know what it is. It's just, if you're a tiny baby that's born prematurely in Sacramento, California, I would just genuinely have concerns, because honestly, I would never live in Sacramento, California because of this. I would immediately pack my belongings and just at least move to a neighboring city. This is what Sacramento, California is known for. I mean, only by me anyway. I'm just saying that personally, I can't imagine going to Sacramento and having a kid. That would just be a horrible idea. And I hope after everybody listens to this, they just move out of Sacramento, California, and leave it a total desolate place. I mean, I want the real estate value to just tank there. just because of this. So because Warren Jeffs was born prematurely, then he was looked on as a pretty special kid by his dad and his mother. According to the stories that I heard when I was young, couple special angels came and they were standing in the room. I heard the story from herself several times, and I'm unsure what actually was going on there. Maybe it was some special angel just making sure she stayed. Hell, I just don't know what happened. So her dad's grandpa is who was one of the people in the room there, and some other prophets. And they were just, I don't know if they were just standing in the air or if they were sitting on her couch just drinking some wine, or I have no idea what they were doing, but she said they were in there. I can't remember if she said they would talking to her or what, but anyway, Dad was this special kid. He was born 2 months early. When I was really young, they would give us this shoebox and say, when your dad was a baby, he could fit in here. It was like a really small shoebox, and they would give us like a 2-quart jar and say your dad could fit in here when he was little. Basically just trying to explain to us that it was only by the grace of God that he was able to survive. And so to his parents, he was really special. Now, in Warren Jeffs' early life, he had several siblings because his dad lived polygamy. Actually, 5 generations back from me, all of them lived polygamy. Just Dad went off the rails a little bit more than the rest of them. When you look at Dad's story, you do have to consider everything that happened before he was around, because there was a lot of crazy things that happened before he came around. And if you ask me, it was a perfect storm of events that were set up to happen in the crazy way that they did. So I wouldn't only blame Dad because of the situation he was put in. I mean, I do blame him for all the things that he did, but I wouldn't say that the same thing would have happened from him if it had been a different circumstance and a different set of events. I think he was 23 years old when he got married to his first wife, and the prophet, so the FLDS prophet at that time was Roy Johnson. Roy Johnson got Dad's father and himself, and they were all there, and it was some special event. Dad got married to his first wife, and 2 years later, I think, or not even 100% sure, don't take my word on that, he got married to his second wife, and it was a while before he got any more wives, but he was pretty young at this point. So, and his dad also lived polygamy from his own mom was a polygamist wife. So he's very acquainted with all this stuff, and he also is being raised by a dad that strongly believes in fundamentalism, fundamental Mormonism, and his dad left the LDS church to join the FLDS church, and in that process gave up his wife, who was pretty cool. And it's kind of a crazy story, but Dad was very well aware of all this stuff as he became older, especially into his 20s and 30s, and got married. And I believe he was in his 30s when he became the school principal, but I'd have to actually look that up. Oh, I'm almost 100% sure. I wasn't around for all this time, and so I'm going to kind of skip over some of the things that happened through all this time, and we're going to get to when I was around. But first, I got to cover his accusations from his daughters and his sisters, saying that he sexually abused them in some way. From my understanding, there was never any. I'm talking about his older years. I'm not talking about what happened when he was young and in his father's house. I'm talking about after he was married, after he had daughters. So his daughters say, you can read Rachel's book and other books on this, but his daughters say that he sexually touched them inappropriately. And personally, I just wasn't around. I just didn't exist at that time. So all I can do is take people's word for what happened at that time and kind of logically make sense of everything that was going on. I just take my sister's word for it, and I trust that everybody's telling the truth, which I have no reason to doubt that they are. I did ask a lot of older people in the FLDS and other people that were right there if they felt like this was going on, or how did they view this? Did they believe that these sexual misconduct was happening? And from everything I can hear, a lot of people were not suspicious at all about it at the time, but looking back, they're a little more suspicious on it. So there was times Dad was alone with his daughters, and these things could have easily happened. So I just take Dad's daughter's words on these things. I have no reason not to, especially if you get further down the road. I would be surprised if these things didn't happen because of some of the other stuff that happened down the road with Warren Jeffs taking, super underage wives. And when I say super, I just mean, 12, 13, not like 16, 17. I just mean really underage wives. With all that stuff that happened later on down the road, I think that there is absolutely no reason to not believe those accusations from his daughters in those earlier years when he was the school principal, and he wasn't too prominent in the community yet, but there's no reason for me to believe that any of that didn't happen. So all I can say is take their word on it, get their books if you want to read them, and you can see what they have to say about that stuff. Now, Jaden Jeffs, Warren's father, felt that he was a better teacher than he himself was. And if you go listen to Dad's trainings and you really understand the Mormon doctrine, at least that version of it, you'll understand why Ruthen felt this way. He felt like Warren was a really special teacher, and he actually knew from some of his daughters about Warren's misconduct, from my understanding. But because Warren was such a powerful teacher, he didn't correct Warren for the sexual misconduct that he had been accused of in earlier years. So I do think Ruthen knew about a lot of this stuff that was going on, but he just felt like Warren was such a powerful teacher, and he did say Warren should say sorry to his sisters for it, but I think that's about as far as it went. So again, I believe that a big part of how Warren Jeffs was raised is the reason why he's the way he is. And if you look at Warren Jeffs' family, you'll see an insane strictness. For people like me, you'll see an insane strictness on the rules of morality, meaning the separation between the boys and girls. There was insane separation and insane strictness. And I think that some of the things that happened in Dad's early life kind of made so it would be that way for his family. I think that you have this perfect storm of a situation where Ruthen Jeffs, Warren's dad, Leroy Johnson, and the prophets before him all the way back, they really look at the year 2000 as this year that is, the coming of Christ, and somewhere around that time, the coming of Christ will happen. And so you're literally setting Warren Jeffs up. He's this powerful teacher. He really is deep into the doctrine. For people that don't believe that Warren Jeffs was deeply religious and really believed what he said, I would just point to the hours and hours he spent compiling FLDS books and doing all that kind of stuff. And perhaps there was a time where he wasn't nearly as involved in it as he was later on. But I think that one of my opinions is that the things that he did with his daughters that continued to happen, they were kind of sexual appetites he had got from when he was really young. And in my opinion, he just had a hard time not doing these sexual acts, but at the same time, another part of him was deeply religious and deeply into the gospel that he was a part of, and he became this powerful teacher. And the more he did, the more guilty he felt about the sexual acts that he had done. But at the same time, he was really struggling with, because he became so deeply devoted to these moral principles that there's no way he didn't feel bad at some point about his own sexual misconduct. And it's very hypocritical, but to me, the way the human mind works, this is very possible, where people have two different parts and they try to hide them from each other as much as they can. So I think there was a lot of this going on where Warren Jeffs was lying to himself about his past, but he was deeply devoted into the religious principles, and I think the religious principles actually gave him a door to kind of get away from that dark side of himself, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it stopped. And so, in my personal view, this is where Warren Jeffs' vision started, is from all these other prophets teaching about the year 2000 being around the time that Jesus Christ would come back. And they also continually teaching that around this time great destructions would happen and all this other stuff. And Warren Jeffs totally believed that as time went on, and he became so into all this scripture that he, for his father, ended up compiling multiple books. Almost all the books that I read as a child growing up were books that were compiled by Warren Jeffs. Even if they were the sermons of Roy Johnson or Reuben Jeffs, they're all compiled by Warren Jeffs. And so he was this deeply into this religion and the vision of this religion. But I think this sexual side of him just really was still manifesting itself in a lot of ways, and I don't think he liked that necessarily. But I also think that he just couldn't stop himself, and I think this probably started at a really young age, unfortunately. So at some point, Dad became much more prominent. I would say in the 1990s, he became much more trusted by his dad, especially because of a lot of the religious teachings he was giving to the people, and he even started talking in meetings for his father. His father was getting older, and he would stand up and say, "Today, my son Warren will give my message to you." And then Warren Jeffs would stand up and give a lecture, and even all the people many times felt those were really powerful training. Now, a lot of people like to say that from the early 1990s, Warren Jeffs was angling and doing all kinds of things to sometime gain control of the FLDS. That hasn't been exactly obvious to me. I don't exactly see that. I think it was more him inside this vision with his dad, trying to work towards the second coming of Jesus Christ, and he felt like his dad was a really special person and was going to be the last prophet. I think to some degree he really believed this. There's some pretty good evidence that at some point he even felt like he was going to have to die for his dad. People can debate whether that's true or not, but I think that there's probably some truth to that, just knowing the characteristics of Warren Jeffs and kind of having experienced that vision to some degree and knowing how it feels to be in it, then I understand that he very well could have felt somewhat this way, where he felt like he had to die in order, there had to be some witness called to heaven or something going on like that for the redemption of Zion to start. In some way, I think he felt special that way, but I don't know. I'm not saying that he absolutely believed he was going to die. I'm just suggesting that that may have been a possibility. Well, I know that he said it. I guess we're debating about if he genuinely believed it. And what I'm saying is I think he did. But you can debate that and think whatever you want. I don't really care. At some point, Jaden Jeffs has this stroke. I was only 1 year old or 0 years old at this time, but this is when I was around, and of course I don't remember these exact events, but I'm still going to tell them in more detail. I'm going to start acting like I know more and more because I think I do. There was people right there that I've been able to really ask a lot of questions to. So Jaden Jeffs has this stroke, and according to a lot of people, Warren Jeffs sort of just started running everything, and he was manipulating his father to take over the FLDS. In my personal view, he truly believed in his dad, and I think his dad told him to take over in a lot of ways, and I don't know every detail, and I'm not a mind reader, and I'm not a perfect psychologist, but from my understanding of the situation, he wasn't being manipulative to his dad at this point. He was just, there's a lot of different ways to look at this, because I guess the way I would explain it is inside Warren Jeffs, there probably was a very narcissistic trait that wanted control of everything, but it needed justification through the morality of his vision. And so in a lot of ways, he was using the vision that he had of Zion being redeemed and that his own dad had given him of Zion being redeemed. He was using that vision to justify a lot of the things he was doing. So it's not like even to himself, he probably didn't believe, oh, I'm going to do this bad thing, or how can I make this bad thing look good to everybody else, but I get what I want. I don't think that's necessarily how he was seeing it. I think to him, those dark desires and different things were manifesting themselves through justification of morality, or the morality was the justification for him, but even in his own mind. So he wasn't just doing it for other people, he was also doing it for his own mind. Because if Warren just wanted to take over for sex, money, and power at this point, I think he could have easily done that and gone about it in a way that the tithing would have continued to flow really well, and he could have been the leader for clear until now or later, and he would have never got in trouble with the law. I mean, he could have managed it in that way if he really was just after these things. So, yes, he was after these things, but I think they manifested through a lens of morality, even to his own mind, where he needed them justified in his own mind. And I think that in general can lead you down a road of doing much greater evils than if you were just openly after sex, money, and power. This is one of the reasons I believe that you have to acknowledge your dark side. And I've experienced this in a lot of ways, because every bit of my dark side was compressed from the time I was really young to the time I was 20 years old, and none of it ever showed. And so, but you have to understand that dark side is still there, and it's going to manifest somehow. And if you can't acknowledge it, then it's going to, something's bad is probably going to happen in a way that you think is good. And this is when people get delusional. So Warren Jeffs starts doing a lot of the meetings and whatnot. And over time, he becomes this sort of pretty strict ruler. And this is, I think, a lot of the narcissism that may have been in there that people talk about that's in Warren Jeffs began to manifest, but only after it was justified through morality in his own mind. Warren Jeffs believed his dad was going to be renewed. I think he genuinely thought he was. But one day his dad died from, I can't remember, some medical problem. He was 92 years old. And I actually kind of remember this. I was 4 years old at the time. It was in 2002. And Warren Jeffs was definitely in the best position to take over the FLDS. His father had said multiple times, Warren will be the next leader. I mean, you have quite a bit of evidence of this from multiple people saying Rutland Jeffs often would talk about Warren taking over. So I think this idea that it wasn't his dad's idea in any way isn't accurate. I think Warren Jeffs, yeah, sure, he probably wanted to take over, but I think Rutland Jeffs did ultimately put his son in a position to take over. And I don't think Rutland Jeffs was totally out of his mind when, through these 4 years after he had a stroke, I do believe that Warren probably was doing some things that his dad wouldn't have done, but that doesn't necessarily mean his dad was out of his mind. I guess there's a argument to be made both ways. I'll let people think whatever they want. I don't really care at this point. It didn't change anything that was going to happen. So Rutland Jeffs dies, and Warren Jeffs has this slow takeover where he slowly basically reveals to the people that, I'm the boss now, and I'm the prophet now. You guys are going to do what I say. I remember even a lot of prominent men in the community at the time just immediately supported Warren Jeffs to be the prophet. So whether it took a year or 2 years or the time it actually took, which was a few months, I think Warren Jeffs was just put in a good position by his dad to become the prophet. I don't think we can really see it any other way. Nobody was given the apostleship, and so dad claims that after his dad died, his dad and Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ came to him and laid his hands on his head. He claimed this later, like in 2010, 2011, and after. I never heard it before that. So dad had this idea that Zion had to be redeemed, and he thought Jesus Christ was talking to him, and he was really into this vision. He really lived by the teachings of Joseph Smith, which, if you ask me, will just lead you into that position, at least if you're really, really devoted to him. In my opinion, following the teachings of Joseph Smith is a recipe for getting yourself into some serious spiritual situations that are kind of unexplainable unless you've been in them. But I think that's kind of, at this point, Dad had been around other key leaders of the FLDS, and even they said that he was a better teacher than they were. So, and that he understood the spiritual aspect of all this, and the deeper teachings of all this, but even better than they did. So Warren Jeffs felt pretty special about that, and I think he genuinely inside felt he was special in a sense that he had a deeper understanding of the spiritual side of all this. So in this vision, he decides, he's getting these revelations, and I think, in my opinion, he really believes they're revelations. He really believes he's this special person, and he's redeeming Zion and whatnot. So he gets this call to start the redemption of Zion, and he goes and buys these lands of refuge. And you have to understand that the narcissism and the traits of evil that may have been within him were completely covered by a layer of morality to where he couldn't see him in any other way except through the lens of morality. So once he believed when he became the prophet, he believed he was so pure and led by revelation to such a high degree that a lot of his feelings were revelation. And this justified every narcissistic trait in every possible way. So he started correcting all kinds of different people in the community that really weren't doing that bad of things, just because his narcissism justified it through a lens of revelation, essentially, where he thought it was revelation. And he was going about it in this religious and spiritual way. But ultimately, yes, it was his desires being fulfilled, his, dark desires being fulfilled. But, sorry guys, I just have to stop and drink some more wine for a little bit. Okay, so he starts excommunicating men that don't totally agree with him, and he takes all his dad's wives and marries a few of them to other men, but then takes the rest of them and just marries them himself. If you're ever wondering, if your dad has like 40 wives or something, and you're like, what should we do with these guys, all these women? Should we just give them to these other guys, or should I just marry them myself? I mean, what the hell? So he marries all his dad's wives, and it's kind of crazy because a lot of them, I think, wanted to marry Warren in the first place. They were so young, they wanted to marry Warren Jeffs before they ever married Ruthen Jeffs. And I guess this is a good argument to think that Warren Jeffs was totally aware and knew exactly what he was doing, is this idea that they all got married to Ruthen Jeffs with the idea in mind that, hey, when he dies, I'll just marry them. I don't really see it that way, but whatever. You can think whatever you want. A lot of them were pretty young, so hey, why not? I mean, I'm not encouraging that. I'm just looking at this from the perspective of Warren Jeffs. And look, he went ahead and married them all. So say what you want about it, but that's what happened. And it's kind of a disgusting situation, I guess. But to me, growing up, they were all just mothers. So looking back on it, I just kind of laugh and think whatever. I don't even know what to think. I don't even believe that we actually exist. I think we're just in a video game, and in this video game I just randomly decided to make a video and put it on YouTube and see how well it does. I mean, I really do sometimes wonder if we actually exist, because I wake up sometimes in the morning and I'm just like, wasn't that just yesterday that I was in this situation? And I just think, gosh, there's no way this is real. Especially because I wake up sometimes and I feel exactly like I did back in that day. And it's like overnight my mindset has kind of shifted back. And it's the weirdest thing. It's kind of a really depressing feeling. Especially because I used to be so into it and so devoted to it that I just think that sometimes during the night, my mindset shifts back to where I was once, and then I wake up and I'm just like, gosh, this is weird. This is so weird. Okay, so Warren Jeffs gets all these different lands of refuge, and he moves his children to him. He feels like his children are going to be hurt if they stay in Short Creek. And this is one of the reasons I believe that Warren Jeffs was in a vision more and justifying all the things he was doing through a lens of morality, through a thick layer of morality that was blinding him from his own narcissistic traits, is because he truly was worried that the devil was after his children in some way. And the devil was after him and his family. He was genuinely, as far as I can tell, just genuinely scared that the devil was after his children in some way, and God was warning him that he needed to move them away, and that he himself, his life was always being sought. And so this is one of the reasons I think he was in this vision. And he moves all his children to lands of refuge and other places, and his family, and then down there in Texas at R17, this land he named R17. It's so funny, like, next time you're really scared and you're afraid people are coming after you, and you have all these wives, and you go buy a piece of land and just name it R17, Refuge 17. I mean, who does that? I've often, since I've left the FLDS, I've often wondered what 17 meant, because Dad used to say to his wives a lot, "You're all 17 to me," and or at some point he said that, and I remember some of the mothers telling us this story. You know, they were telling us, yeah, we were all standing there, and Warren was looking at everybody, and he says, "You're all 17 to me." And so I just have associated those two numbers for so long, and just don't know why. But 17, like, whatever. I don't know. So Dad starts building all these different buildings, and he starts calling for tithing of the people like crazy because it's so expensive. And he pushes the people at R17 so hard that they're working 22 hours a day sometimes, and they hardly get any sleep or any time with their family. And in my view, he was so worried and just felt the pressure of the different people that he had kicked out of the community just coming after him. Because some of the people he kicked out, you got to realize he took their families away. He took all their children away and said, "You leave. You're a bad person. Now leave forever." And their businesses were taken away as well. And so some of these people were vicious. And this is one of the reasons Warren Jeffs is in jail today, because he did this early on. And these people, it didn't matter what it took. They were after him. And Warren Jeffs didn't understand the laws and rules of power that would happen to him if he just did all these things. And so these people came after him in every way they could. And they didn't stop until he was in prison. And understandably, right? I mean, it makes sense. Personally, when I was in the process of leaving the FLDS, I looked at a lot of the things these people were saying and whatnot, and I felt that perhaps a lot of them were untrue, but I kind of don't care, because he probably wouldn't be in prison today if they hadn't done what they did. So, you know, I guess sometimes you have to lie to get what you want, or to, you know, if somebody does that much wrong to you, if somebody ripped away your family and took your business and the whole community you love and just trashed your name among everybody, you'd want to kill them, right? And so certainly that's how some of these men felt towards Warren Jeffs after he just kicked him out of the community. And I don't think Warren Jeffs realized it, but he himself was just creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where he was really worried, and he kicked out a lot of people, and ultimately, because he did what he did, they started coming after him. And then because he was in this narcissistic mindset and also all the dark parts of him were coming up through they were manifesting through the layer of morality that he felt like was making him such a good person. Then he started marrying really underage wives and justifying it through the lens that God commanded him to do it. Because in his mind, he couldn't just do that. He needed God to tell him to do it. And so God would tell him to do it, and then it was right. And that way he was able to convince other people that it was right, because he believed it so much himself. So there's stories about Warren Jeffs going to strip clubs in Las Vegas and just chilling, maybe drinking some beer or something. It's kind of funny. My young mind could have I never could have imagined this as a young boy. I thought when I found out these things, I really had to investigate them to see if they were true. The fact that Warren Jeffs was going to bars and going to the beach and whatnot, I probably made me consider leaving as much as any of the darker facts that you might find out about Warren Jeffs. Just because of the mindset I was in, and I always envisioned this perfect person. But again, even in these situations, I truly believe that Warren Jeffs felt like he was justifying what he was doing through a moral lens. And this is why he would say he's out witnessing the wickedness of the world. And he would tell the people at R17 that even, saying, the Lord had me go here and witness the wickedness of the world. So in my view, he still needed this justified in his mind through that lens. And so he would go down to these strip beaches in Las Vegas, or in Florida, New Orleans, and go to these strip clubs in Las Vegas and just different places all around the country and do these things under the guise of witnessing the wickedness of the world. But I do believe that was actually what he thought in his mind to justify this. I mean, everything in his mind had to be justified through the lens of morality, not just for the people around him, but for himself, which is crazy. And one of the stupidest places you can ever put yourself in. You're just lying to yourself constantly. I mean, in that sense, that's why Warren Jeffs went so far and didn't care what everybody thought. Because he believed that God was guiding him, and he justified all the things he did through that lens. Now, there's one more point I want to make about Warren Jeffs marrying underage wives, and it's the people in the FLDS. Warren Jeffs was able to sell this vision to them so well that he was a divine person because of the genuine flow of authenticity, and I guess people in the FLDS call it the Spirit of God. The flow of that from him to other people made those people feel like he was such a special person that if he married a 12-year-old, they didn't feel like he was a bad person. But if anybody else in the world did, then it would have been pure evil. Most people don't know this, but FLDS people in general, they look at somebody like Sam Bateman. I mean, if you look at the headlines, Sam Bateman's this FLDS leader that is just another Warren Jeffs, basically. But the reality is, even most people in the FLDS, the reason I love this example is everybody in the FLDS looks at Sam Bateman as this total evil, wicked person because he abused his authority to marry these really young girls. They were even younger, like 9 years old. He's a creep, right? But everybody in the FLDS, they see Sam Bateman as really bad, but they don't see Warren Jeffs as bad. And Sam Bateman just has nobody that's loyal to him, really, because even everybody in the FLDS thinks he's a creep. And I know the headlines say that he's an FLDS leader and all that, but the reality is he just had like 20 or 30 people that he convinced to follow him. So certainly he came from a place that cultivated the possibility for this to happen, but the FLDS don't look at him as a good person in any way. And I guess the main reason I bring this up is to show the contrast of how Warren Jeffs helped everybody around him. And I think he started by convincing himself, but he convinced everyone around him he was so good that marrying a 12-year-old wasn't bad for him, but if they look at anybody else in the world, they'll condemn them and say, yeah, they should definitely go to prison. If you ask any FLDS person today, should that person go to prison, like Sam Bateman for marrying a really young girl, every one of them will say, oh, of course, that is disgusting, but they'll defend Warren Jeffs. And so for me, in the process of leaving the FLDS, it was just a matter of asking these questions. Why do I defend Warren Jeffs and not any other person that does these exact same things? And I had to really confront myself about this and say, why do you do this? And it pretty soon became clear to me that it was just my own justification and brainwashing and there was no true logical reason. And I could easily see why other people in the world thought so badly of Warren Jeffs, the same way I would look at any other person that married a 12-year-old and say they're disgusting, just like when I heard about Sam Bateman and said, oh, that is disgusting. Well, why didn't I see Warren Jeffs in that same way? Well, by the time the Sam Bateman thing came out, I did see it that way, but I'm just saying I looked at any other person that did those kind of things and said, disgusting, that person should be in prison for life. But I was unwilling to view Warren Jeffs in that same way. So Warren Jeffs is traveling around acting like he's some holy person, and he's witnessing all these wicked things. He's going to these different sex places. He's watching porn. He's doing all kinds of crazy things. He comes back to R17 every once in a while, and I really remember this because now I'm getting old enough to remember everything that was happening. He comes back to R17. He picks up 2 more wives, and he heads out, and they put jeans and T-shirts on and put their hair down to blend in with the rest of the world because he's running from the FBI. And they go out, and this is when a lot of times that they would have sex while they were gone. I just know that's true because I've heard too many stories to think that it's not. And anyway, it was really usually it was 2 weeks because I remember 2 of the mothers, besides the ones that were always with Warren Jeffs. So he had 2 or 3 that were just always with him. But then he would come back and grab 2 or 3. They would head out for 2 weeks. 2 weeks they would come back. They would swap out. Then they would go again. This was just all throughout 2005, 2006. That's just how it was. I just remember our caretaker being gone for 2 weeks, then coming back. I remember my mom being gone for 2 weeks, then come back. So I just know this is how it was. Warren Jeffs gets put on the FBI most wanted list, and he runs away for, I don't know, a year or something like that. And one day he gets pulled over between Las Vegas, somewhere over by Las Vegas. A lot of people say it was a routine traffic stop, but as far as I understand, that's inaccurate. I believe the FBI had actually somehow tracked him and knew that he was in a red escalator between 2 points, and they told the police, any red escalator between these 2 points, you should pull over. That was the story I was told clear back when it happened. I'm not 100% sure. I hear repeatedly that it was a routine traffic stop, but from my understanding, this was not a routine traffic stop. I think they say it's a routine traffic stop because the licensing on the car was different, and so that's what the cop, when they pulled him over, they said, this is why I'm pulling you over. But from my understanding, the FBI had actually tracked him down to that location and said he's in a red escalator between these 2 places. And so the cops were just pulling any red escalator between those 2 places over to check out and see if one of the people in them were Warren Jeffs. So Warren Jeffs gets put in prison. He goes through these court trials in Utah and Arizona. He gets convicted, and then he appeals, and I think somehow gets the court cases dismissed or something like that, and gets his convictions dismissed. But somewhere between there, then the 2008 raid happens, which I want to talk about a little bit, because Warren Jeffs had his records put in the temple on the FLDS ranch down in Texas. And I just think that was one of the stupidest things he could have done. And I'm not arguing in any way for Warren Jeffs. I'm just sometimes astounded at some of the stupidity that went on. And I think a big reason why he did this is because he just believed that God was going to protect him and not let people go into the temple. I think these records were actually moved to the temple just a few weeks before the 2008 raid happened, and they seized those records. That's my understanding. I'm sometimes pretty amazed at how stupid some of the decisions were that were made, but I'm not arguing for any of these bad things to happen. it's just looking back and seeing all the bad decisions. I said, there's no way Warren Jeffs was in the mindset of wanting sex, money, and power only, because he would have acted a lot differently in a lot of situations. Ultimately, that's what he wanted, but I don't think he recognized that in himself, and he covered it in a thick layer of morality. That's all I'm saying. I remember being... So when his 2009, 2010 trials were all wrapped up in Utah and Arizona, Texas asked that Warren Jeffs be extradited over to them so that he could face trial there. He was extradited over. They used all the records from the raid in Texas to bring a case against Warren Jeffs and ultimately put him in prison. Through that trial, Warren Jeffs was totally crazy. It's pretty fascinating trial. He stood up and told the judge she was going to die by these severe judgments of God and all this other crazy stuff. And at the time, I didn't know much. I just was fasting and praying for Warren Jeffs to get out of prison, and he was sentenced to life in prison. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what happened. After Warren Jeffs was put in prison for life, his vision, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what's going on for sure, guys, but he just started doing a lot of stuff that was crazy. And, well, real quick here. When Warren Jeffs was getting flown into El Dorado from Arizona, they flew him over the R-17 twice. So I think he requested from the helicopter pilot, because he was being put in prison in the little jail right there in El Dorado while he was waiting trial. They flew him. He requested his pilot to fly him over twice, and I think he flew over R-17 twice and was just looking out the helicopter window. That would be crazy. I mean, I remember this. He called right after, and we were all in the living room, and he was telling us about it, and he told them to go turn the temple light on, because there's a light on the temple he had told them to turn off when the 2008 raid happened, and it had never been on since, and he told them to go turn this light on. And so they turned it on, and I remember the mother saying, go look outside and tell us what you see. And I went and looked outside, and I could not see anything different. I was like, what? And finally one of them was like, the temple light is on. I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't notice. So in 2011, after Warren Jeffs got convicted, everything started getting crazy. And he started sending everybody away. Multiple families just started slowly leaving R-17. I was there. And the projects went from, because we were building like an amphitheater and however you say that, all kinds of different buildings. We were building a watchtower, and Warren Jeffs just started sending everybody away. And the directives started getting crazy. Like the tower we built down there in R-17, it had like 5-foot thick concrete walls at the bottom. And it had this massive concrete base. And it looked like this military style tower. And as soon as it was done, they sent a picture to Warren Jeffs, and he said, knock it over. Looks too militaristic. And the Lord doesn't like it, so knock it over. So they went and just knocked it over. I mean, it took him a long time, but it's just so many crazy decisions. And he started sending families away. Somewhere during this time, I got sent away a few times for weird things. Like my brother and I were sitting. So there was 3 of my brothers. It was myself, another brother that's just older than me was sitting 2 chairs over from me, and then my younger brother was sitting in the middle. And I reached over with my pen. and just started marking his jeans a little bit with my pen between the lines. And my other brother reached over to his other leg and just started doing it. We were just teasing him a little bit, but it wasn't major. And one of the mothers was sitting behind us, and they reached up and tapped my back and said, "Hey, don't do that." But they sent this report to my dad about us two scribbling on his jeans for like maybe a minute or less. This is just, we were sitting in morning class listening to Dad, one of Dad's trainings, and we just kind of were getting bored, and so we did this. And I don't think it was even that big of a deal to the mother that reported us. But ultimately, we get a message a few days later saying, "Hey, you're supposed to leave because you scribbled on your brother's jeans, and the Lord was really upset because you were mean teasing." And I still get such a kick out of this because I could not believe we were being sent away for scribbling on. I remember at some point, my sisters didn't like how a bunch of flowers were in the flower beds. So they went and ripped a bunch out, and Dad sent them all away for 2 weeks for destroying life or something. It was the funniest thing to me. Even at the time, I laughed pretty hard about it. I specifically remember hearing about it and really just busting out laughing about it. I couldn't believe we were being sent away for scribbling on his jeans a little bit during morning class. So in 2011, it just got crazier and crazier. By 2012, it was just getting insane. June 2012, I remember this revelation that named a whole bunch of men as being forever known members. Dad, when supposedly they had committed some kind of abortion, like even if they had taken contraceptive pills, some kind of contraceptive pills of any kind, even if it was, it didn't have to be actually removing a baby from someone's womb, just any kind of contraceptive to make so that somebody didn't get pregnant. Dad would say all these different men had done this, even if it was 30 years ago, then they were getting sent away for it. I remember one of the Dad's brothers telling us this story where they asked Dad, "What we going to do? Because we're running out of people, we're running out of money, we're running out of all this stuff. What are we going to do?" And Dad said something like, "This is the work of God. Why would we worry about that? He'll open the way." And so this was kind of everybody's mindset, but everybody was getting sent away. And personally, for me, I was looking at this from, I've always been a little bit introspective, where when I see somebody that I'm good friends with and they get sent away for something, I can only look at myself and say, "Oh, am I going to get sent away for that?" And so a lot of times through these times, I was thinking, how am I any better than these other people? But everybody was getting sent away, and we would get these messages, and the times were crazy. And sometimes I almost miss those weird days where it just seemed like so much was changing and things were getting so much more serious. And it was a very odd feeling for me through these 2011, 2012 times. But it was exciting in some way. It was different in some way. It was scary in some way. But 2013, just every year after 2011, just brought an increased level of craziness and insanity and new kinds of revelations that we hadn't heard before. And by 2016, we were getting revelations that were telling us basically, if you're not a member by this certain time, then you're going to go down. You're going to get destroyed when the judgment's coming. They're just about here. I'm laughing because I used to take this so seriously. I would just wonder any day if I was going to look outside and see this mega whirlwind coming, and I was going to get down on my knees and be lifted up, or else not. I remember these particular messages because I was made a non-member, and almost everybody was made a non-member at some point. And then they would get to be a member, and they would not get to be a member, and it would go back and forth, like sometimes 10 times in 1 year. You'd become a member and then a non-member because you did something wrong. And it was just did not make any sense. And I remember this message when I was 16 or 17, but it said it was this warning to Warren Jeffs' sons. And it said something like, it basically was saying you will be eternally damned if you are not a member, because you were so well taught and you were so close to someone that was so close to God, and you knew so much better that if you don't become a member, you will be damned forever. He said something like, you will have to suffer a millennium, 1,000 years in the next life as soon as you're destroyed, which is going to be pretty quick here, basically, because the judgments are almost here. You're going to be destroyed pretty quick here if you don't become a member. And this sent me into a insane spiritual time that really kind of changed my life in ways that I'm not really going to explain today, because that's not what we're talking about today. But these messages were just getting more and more crazy until one day I was just sent away too with everybody else. But Dad's revelations got crazier and crazier, and by 2017, Warren Jeffs was saying that, so we came to these meetings, and Warren Jeffs was saying that there was only 5 million people left in the United States. And all these other crazy things that had happened. And he was talking about Trump and Putin and all kinds of world leaders, saying that he himself was lifted here and there and different places, and millions of people were lifted off the earth and taken to like Neptune and other planets because they were just bad people, and that's where they were being stored, or their spirits were being stored, or something crazy like that. And the revelations just got crazier and crazier. And then all of a sudden those meetings basically stopped. And I remember everybody that was coming to those meetings there in Colorado City, we were all in a line. And there was this long line, and the gates of the meeting house wouldn't open. And finally, one of the guys that Dad had appointed to do these meetings stepped out of the gate, and every car drove past, and he would just say, these meetings have been canceled, go do the best you can. And that's all he would say. And every car drove by, and he said this to him until everybody was gone and meetings were just over for that period of time. And then after a few months, the meetings started again, and the revelations were even crazier. And so these revelations from 2011 just got consistently crazier, but in 2018 they just got really crazy. And I heard some of these revelations, so I feel like I can say what actually happened to some extent. There was other people that know even more than I do, but these revelations were just absolutely mind-boggling. I can't believe I was just sitting there totally believing them. Like I didn't have, that's why I wear these sunglasses now, because I one day was just sitting in that meeting totally believing these crazy situations, which was totally ridiculous. A lot of people don't believe me when I tell them. They were literally about a lot of dad's closest family cutting each other up. And other FLDS people don't believe when I tell them that this is what the revelations were. But this is absolutely what they were. And it was in a way that, hey, this might happen to you. If you're full of the Spirit of God, then you'll be protected and you'll do the right thing. But it was like, you're going to be put in this situation where a mob attacks you. And if you're not full of the Spirit of God, you're going to take all these crazy drugs and then you're going to start cutting people up. And he gave detailed descriptions about his own wives. I remember this particular detailed description that I haven't forgot because it just really stuck with me for some reason. And it's about one of Dad's wives and his sister, Dad's sister. I probably should be saying Warren Jeffs, but one of Warren Jeffs' wives and one of his sisters, a mob attacks them, and they take these hallucinating drugs or something, and they go up, and one of his daughters is in bed, and they just start cutting her up. But it's like before they do that, they like do sodomy and all these other just crazy descriptions. And people don't believe me when I tell them that that's what these revelations were. But it's true. I mean, unless I've gone crazy, then that's what I heard. That's absolutely. And I think I'm more sane than I've ever been, actually. So I'm pretty sure that I sat there and listened to these things. Because one of the things that I remember is I would go home and I was in this place kind of by myself, and I was just scared because, especially when it got dark outside, I was just like, when are these mobs going to attack me? Because I guarantee they're about to. But these revelations were just insane. And I'm glad I only heard them for a shorter period of time because I'm afraid I would have just gone crazy. And sometimes I think about the people that are still there, and I genuinely wonder if they haven't seen through it, if they still believe either those are true or something. I don't know. Surely by now they're like some way a little bit. I don't know. I'm just suggesting that for the 3 months that I was hearing them, it pushed me to such a point of faithfulness and such a point that I was trying so hard that I just can't explain the constant mental exertion that it pushed me to, and the experiences, kind of spiritual experiences I was receiving from that mental exertion was just crazy, because I so bad didn't want to be one of these people that was going to cut somebody else up. And so when I got sent away, because after these revelations and I got sent away, I just sat there wondering, I wonder if I was just named in there as cutting somebody up or whatever it might be. I don't know that I was. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But what I'm saying is it really woke me up to this idea, because when I left, when I went to work and I was just not hearing the revelations anymore, I wondered if something had been said about me. And I looked at all the other people, and because I knew just a little bit of gossip here and there, I knew enough to know that all those other people were just out working. And as far as I knew, they were just still alive and a lot of people that Dad had said had been killed and gone forever, I thought they were going to be dead. I truly did. And I would go and I would see one of them and I'd be like, what? I remember Dad saying these horrible things about his brother. And I was terrified. And it wasn't just about his brother. It was about some of my brothers. And they were living in a house together up in Salt Lake. And I needed to go over there to get some of my stuff that had been left there. And I was terrified. I thought nobody was going to be there, but I walked in and I saw Dad's brother Leroy. He was standing over there and I was terrified. I grabbed the thing that I was coming to get and I dashed out that door. I wish there was a video of me walking out. I was truly terrified. It's just so funny to me looking back at how terrified I was. I thought if I stayed there too long or if I met him somehow, I was going to get on these hallucinating drugs. And but I'm just telling this because I'm trying to explain to people how insane these revelations got. And the majority of the people in the FLDS right now, they don't realize how crazy these revelations got. I think there was probably 200 or 300 people or less. It might have even been less, like 100 or something, at those meetings so the earlier meetings, there was quite a few. There's probably 1,000 or more people of the FLDS members that were let to come back in 2017 to hear these meetings. But in 2018, there was not that many people. And the group kept getting smaller and smaller. So at the beginning, I think there was at least a couple hundred people. And then I think by the time I left, it almost seems like there was less than 100 people. I always sat in the front, so I'm not 100% sure. But I did get up and say the prayer once in a while and stuff. So I just think there was probably 200 people. I'm just making it up. I don't even know for sure. These aren't official numbers. Just from what I remember, there wasn't that many FLDS people. And if you just got sent to go work and from these meetings, I can see how you would continue to just try to do the best you can. Because after I left, I was doing that for a year, but then a bunch of other things started hitting the fan, and I started finding a whole bunch of things out, and I started using the internet. But for somebody that wasn't me, that didn't get put in more and more painful situations, I can see how they would just stay, and they would really remember and think about those revelations a lot, but they wouldn't be pushed far enough to the point where they would leave because they're still so loyal. And from my understanding, these revelations have just continued and continued till this day, and they're probably crazy. So from my understanding, Dad tells my brothers that are up there in North Dakota and whatnot that they're apostles and they're getting lifted to all these different worlds. And in my view, he's just in this, he's gone totally insane, but I genuinely don't think he's that much more insane than he ever was. I think it's just been a continuation of this vision and a slow moving away from reality that's continued over a long period of time in his own mind, but it's been a continual justification of narcissism and different immoralities through a thick layer of justification through morality type of thing that he's continued in his mind. And so now he's this God and he's among the gods, and a lot of his sons are considered gods, and his wives are considered like these really special people, some of them, and the rest of them are just evil. And he names some people that have been just flat out left as really good people. So it's just in the sense that he's gone so far from reality. He has become more insane than ever before, which is why we're just sitting here drinking wine, because I had to sort all this stuff out. And I'm just glad I did, which is why I drink wine, to both celebrate the fact that I got it sorted out and the fact that I even am alive, if I even am. So that's kind of my short history for Warren Jeffs and how I see it. And if you guys have any questions, let's give it a month, let's give it a few months, and I'll come back to this video. And the top comments on here, whatever the questions are, I'll tackle those in my next video. I'll grab another glass of wine and we'll come and we'll tackle those questions in another video. If you guys have any other video ideas, leave them in the comments below. I know a lot of people want to hear my story, and I don't mind telling my story, and I think at some point I'll do a series of my story, but I don't, until I get, so I write every week on my blog, but until I get my whole story written out on my blog, even the later stories of 2017 and beyond, until I get those written on my blog, I probably won't come on the podcast and do them, because it's hard for me to just come on the podcast and tell the story if I haven't written it already. All these things that I talk about on the podcast are generally going to be things that I've already written about and sort of thought over in my mind. And so it's difficult for me to come and just tell a story without having already kind of thought it out a little bit more, which is one of the reasons I haven't told my later I've just kind of skimmed over my later stories, but also this podcast, I'm trying to keep it away from just being an FLDS channel, because the way I view it is Dad doesn't get to come and make all his posterity before him and all his posterity after him and just ruin their last name. He doesn't get to do that. He doesn't get to ruin my last name and all my children and ancestors' last names. That's just, for me, that's not an option. So another reason why I do the podcast is because I want to become more famous in a good way than Dad was in a bad way. Only in the sense that it's not that I want to be famous. It's just everywhere I go, it seems like people just have to, and it makes sense because you associate someone with what you know most about that thing. And so I just, in some sense, feel obligated to do more good than Dad did bad. And I think some of my brothers feel a lot the same about this, as far as I can tell. And in some sense, I just feel like I have to be better than Dad in every possible way, so that he can't just ruin my name and the posterity. He can't define who I am in any way. And I know a lot of people say, oh, we don't look at you that way. We don't. But just in some sense, my psychology is in a situation where I feel that I have to do something more good than he's done bad in order to restore my last name to honor. And so, and so that's one of the reasons I do the podcast. And that's one of the reasons I have the goal of getting 10,000 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers, because then I can say I'm just as capable, but in a good way. And I can say, they say Dad had $100 million of assets under his control. Well, I feel like I need $200 million of assets under control, but in a good way. Like, I didn't just coerce people to go give me all their money. But at the same time, that's why you should go buy this hoodie, because that'll help me get richer and compete to restore my last name, right? And see, you should do that, because if you don't, then you probably just support pedophiles. Look, I would only get money in a good way, like convincing you that, if you don't get my hoodie, then you're some sort of bad person, but I'm joking. I promise I'm joking. But yeah, it's just a weird dynamic where no matter what anybody says to me, no matter what they do, I feel obligated to do more good in the world than my dad did bad. But good, it almost has to be way more because good doesn't spread like evil does. But who cares? That's one of the reasons we have wine, and that's another reason why I do some of the things I do, because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel exactly like I did, because back then I got my mind to when Dad was telling me I was about to be destroyed and all these other things, and I was just trying so hard not to be. I got my mind to a position where it would literally pray all the time. So I would wake up in the morning and I would be praying. And I would go to bed at night and I wouldn't stop, and then I would fall asleep praying, and then I would wake up praying. So sometimes when I wake up that way, I just think, what the hell is going on here? Anyway, that's enough on this crazy pedophile and all the bullshit that we have dealt with. So if you guys have any questions, leave them below. Go drink yourself some wine, and I will too, even though I'll try to keep it more measured than when I'm talking about Warren Jeffs. Yeah, thanks guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and we will see you around for more cool episodes. Peace out.